What up, world? Established Rich coming right back at you. Let me start right here because this is one of the most honest things I've heard from a comedian in a long time. Mike Epps did something a lot of people never do. He said the quiet part out loud. He admitted that it hurt watching Kevin Hart pass him.
Me and Kevin Hart had a little problem.
Yeah.
Is Kevin was a dude that had came right up under me.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And he blew up and he got famous and he got rich and they were no longer talking about Mike Epps. But before Kevin came along, they was talking, I had this shit locked down.
Right.
I did. I was out on the road, but I didn't know that other part of the business, which was business.
Business.
You know, I got in show business, and all I was good at was the show part of it, because I didn't grow up under business. And all I could speak for was really my work, which in later on in life, that shit ended up helping me because I did good work, and I didn't get the big accolades, but I did good work. But Kevin Hart knew how to do that show and that business, so he was able to get in there, and then I had to end up learning from him.
Damn.
That's how that shit worked.
Yeah.
The old learn from the new learn from the old, and I didn't understand that, so I took it to heart. You know, I took that shit to heart. I was looking at him like, shit, this is a little dude that came up under me that opened up for me. That sometimes I put money in his pocket. And he don't remember, but a couple times I've seen him and he kind of brushed me the wrong way. And see, people do that shit sometimes, especially if you get some success. Sometimes if you get some success and you hot and a person see you and you don't respond to them or act a certain way with them, especially if they are OG to you, they'll take that shit to heart and all. This motherfucker think he better than me. You know, that's how that shit ended up happening. And I told him that when I seen him, I said, you know what? You actually end up putting fire under me. That's what it ended up actually doing. It put fire under me because at the time, man, I was settled in whatever the f I was settled in. I needed some young to come along that was hot and the people was loving them and looking at me like, what you gonna do? You know? That shit hurt, but at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, you know what? I know what I got to do. I got to stick it to them. So I just went back to my regular roots, to who I really was and how I started comedy, you know. And that shit helped me, propelled me to keep going and stop looking at the new, stop looking at the old, and just focus on what you got. Cause there's only one Mike Epps. Ain't gonna be no other Mike Epps. It's only one Mike Epps. Go do Mike Epps, and you're gonna get whatever you get from that. And once I focused in on that, I was able to breathe and I'd be free and not look at the young coming up or the old.
Mike said it plain. Kevin came up under him. They shared space, shared stages, shared rooms. And then one day, the spotlight moved on. Not gradually, not politely. It moved fast. And if you ever been in a creative field, then you know exactly what that feels like. One day you the guy, the next day people stop asking for you and start asking about the guy next to you. That will mess with anybody. And I respect Mike for not acting like he above that feeling. Because here's the part a lot of people won't admit. Talent don't guarantee position. Skills don't guarantee longevity. Respect don't guarantee relevance. This ain't a fair game. It's a real one. Mike thought he had it locked down. And at the time he did. Movies, stand-up, cultural love. But what he didn't have locked down was the part nobody tells you about when you young and creative. The business. And this hit me personally. Because when Mike said all he knew how to do was to work, I felt that. I've been there. I was in the studio every day, writing, recording, stacking songs like that was the goal. More songs, better songs, deeper lyrics. But nobody ever sat me down and said, who is gonna hear this? Nobody ever said, where's the distribution? What is the plan? How does this turn into a career and not just a hard drive full of dreams? I thought being great was enough. It's not. Kevin Hart figured that part out early. And this is where people get confused. Kevin didn't replace Mike by being funnier. He passed him by being structured, by understanding that comedy is the product, but business is the vehicle. Kevin learned how to scale it himself. Brands, partnerships, production, ownership. He turned himself into a system. Mike stayed an artist in a world that rewards architects. And that don't make Mike less talented, it makes him human. What I love about this moment is that Mike didn't try to dismiss Kevin. He didn't downplay his success. He didn't blame the industry. He didn't blame the Illuminati. He said, I had to learn from him. That takes maturity, especially when you the one that's used to being the head. See, people love the idea of the old teaching the young. But life don't always move like that. Sometimes the young pass you and you have a choice. You can get bitter or you can get better. Mike chose better. And that's why this conversation matters to anybody over 35 who has watched the game change around them. This is what happens when you don't evolve. Not because you lazy, not because you stupid, but because you was trained to believe that great work speaks for itself. That was a lie a lot of us grew up on. Work speaks, but business decides who gets the mic. Mike saying, I did the good work is true. But Kevin saying, I did the good work and I built the machine is why the gap is so wide. And the most important thing that Mike said was not even about Kevin. It was about self-awareness. He said that pain forced him to go back to his roots, to remember who he was before comparison entered the room. That's the real lesson. Comparison will erase you if you let it. Not because you losing, but because you stop being you, trying to figure out why somebody else is winning. Mike didn't become Kevin. He became a better version of Mike. And that's why this reconciliation feels real. No fake peace, no industry photo ops, just two men who grew at different speeds and met back up with understanding. This ain't a story about jealousy. It's a story about growing up in public. And if you've ever felt left behind by somebody you helped or by somebody who came after you, because sometimes life ain't telling you done. It's telling you got more to learn. And that's not an insult. That's a second chance. Now, let's take this a step deeper because Mike Epps talking like this is bigger than Mike Epps. This is a mirror moment for an entire generation of black creators. See, for a long time, we grew up in a culture where talent was supposed to be the final argument. If you were funnier, you won. If you rap better, you won. If your crowd response was crazy, you won. That was logic. But the game changed while a lot of us were still playing the old rules. Kevin Hart didn't just master comedy. He mastered scale. He understood that the stage is temporary, but the infrastructure is forever. And this is where a lot of people get uncomfortable because it forces you to ask the hard question. What are you really building? Mike was building moments. Kevin was building a machine. And again, this ain't no insult to Mike. I love Mike. This is a reality check for anybody who thinks greatness automatically translates to leverage. Kevin figured out how to turn himself into a business entity. And he didn't just want to be on the call sheet. He wanted to own the call. And when Mike said, all I knew was my work, that hit me in the chest because that's how most of us start. We fall in love with the craft, the process, the creation. But nobody tells you that at a certain level, craft is just the entry fee. After that, it's strategy. And this is where envy gets misunderstood. Mike wasn't mad that Kevin was funny. He was frustrated that the industry stopped looking at him the same way. And that's a different pain. That's the pain of realizing the room you once controlled is going by new rules and nobody sent you the memo. Now, let's talk about why this matters so much right now. Mike Epps is not the only one who had to go through this. We've seen this story in music, in sports, in film, in content creation. People who were first don't always end up last, but they do get passed if they don't adjust. And here's the part that don't get talked about enough. Kevin Hart didn't just build a brand. He built a system that could function without him doing everything. That's the real flex. Anybody can be busy. Very few people can be scalable. And when Mike said he had to learn from Kevin, that's when I knew this wasn't about beef no more. This was humility. That was a man looking back and saying, I see where I missed it. And that takes courage when you've been a star. This is why I don't look at this as Mike losing to Kevin. This is Mike evolving past the comparison. Kevin's success didn't take anything from Mike. It just exposed what Mike hadn't built yet. And that's a hard truth for any creative. Somebody else winning doesn't mean you fail. It means the game is bigger than your own lane. When Mike said there's only one Mike Epps, that wasn't defiance. That was acceptance. He stopped chasing what he wasn't meant to be and doubled down on what he actually is. And that's where real peace comes from. Not from being number one, but from being aligned. This whole story is a masterclass in growth, not just for comedians, but for anybody who has ever watched the world move past him and had to decide whether to get bitter or get better. Mike chose better. And that's why this moment hit different, because it's not about who won. It's about who learned. Listen, what Mike Epps did here was bigger than comedy. This was a man telling the truth about how success really works when the cameras are turned off. We live in a time where people pretend they never felt envy, never felt overlooked, never felt replaced. But that's not a real life. Real life is watching somebody come after you and pass you without asking permission. Real life is realizing that talent alone would not protect you from evolution. Mike Epps could have stayed bitter, stayed loud, and stayed stuck in the past. Instead, he did something a lot of people can't do. He looked in the mirror without flinching. He said, I had it locked down, but I didn't know the business. That sentence right there is a warning and a lesson. Because how many of us are sitting on skill without structure? How many of us are in love with the craft but avoid the classroom? How many of us want the results without the blueprint? Kevin Hart didn't just win because he was funny. He won because he understood that the industry is a system, not a talent show. And Mike finally said what a lot of OGs never say out loud. The young can teach the old just like the old can teach the young. That's growth, that's maturity, that's survival. And for any creator watching this, listen close. You can love what you do and still learn how to protect it, scale it, and sell it. You can be great and still get left behind if you don't adapt. That don't make you a failure. It makes you human. Mike Epps ain't lose his legacy when Kevin Hart blew up. He just had to redefine it. And that's the part people miss. Success is not a straight line. It's a series of adjustments. Sometimes you're the future, sometimes you're the foundation. Both matter. This is why I respect this moment from Mike Epps. Not because he apologized and not because he explained himself, but because he grew without pretending he was perfect. And that's the energy we need more of. Honesty over image. Progress over pride. Business over ego. If you talented, learn the game. If you great, build something that outlives you. And if you ever feel that sting of watching somebody else win, don't run from it. Let it teach you what you need to learn next. Because the goal isn't to be first forever. The goal is to still be standing when the game changes. But hey, that's just my opinion. What's yours? Like, comment, subscribe. Establish Rich. I'll be back with another one. Peace.